There is a moment every year, right before the sun leaves Aries, where something subtle but decisive happens. Aries is supposed to be the first spark, raw movement, the impulse that says, I exist, I move, I begin. And yet, right at the very end of the sign, before anything becomes real, before anything takes form in Taurus, there's a star, Al-Risha. Al-Risha is known as the cord, the knot, the binding between two fishes, two directions, two currents, two realities that are meant to remain connected without collapsing into each other. And I keep asking myself something I can't unsee. Why is there a binding mechanism sitting at the very threshold of becoming? Why does something that is supposed to move freely, Aries, pure initiation, encounter a knot before it even reaches embodiment? Because if you've been paying attention, not to astrology but to reality, you recognize this pattern everywhere. Movement begins, impulse rises, clarity appears, and then something binds it. Not violently, but subtly. A condition, a requirement, an expectation. Before you move, make sure it makes sense. Before you choose, think about the consequences. Before you begin, secure stability. And just like that, the spark is no longer free. It's negotiated. This is where I stop asking what the star means and start asking what kind of system puts a cord at the edge of creation? Because this doesn't only show up in relationships where people stay bound to something long after its life has left. It shows up in money. You feel the impulse to create, to offer, to move something through you, and immediately the system asks, how you monetize this? Is it sustainable? Is it safe? So instead of movement, feedback, adjustment, which is coherence, you get movement, pressure, hesitation, suppression. The loop breaks before it even begins. And then we call it being realistic. But it's not realism, it's preemptive binding. Work systems do the same thing. You don't enter work as a living exchange of energy and skill. You enter already bound by contracts, expectations, hierarchies that were designed before you even got there. So your movement isn't discovered, it's contained. And if you try to move outside of that, the system pushes back. Because your movement exposes the fact that the structure cannot adapt. Digital spaces, even worse, they simulate movement, they simulate expression, they simulate agency. But everything is pre-shaped by algorithms that decide what gets seen, what circulates, what disappears. So people think they're moving freely while being subtly bound at every level of visibility. This is Al-Risha distorted, not a living cord, a pre-installed constraint. A system that says you can connect, but only like this. You can move, but only within this frame. You can exist, but only if it holds together in a way we recognize. And over time, something happens that is far more dangerous than control. People stop trusting their own movement. Not because they lack instinct, but because every instinct has been met with friction, redirection, or silence. So the nervous system adapts. Don't move unless it's already validated. Don't begin unless it's already secure. Don't trust the impulse. This is how agency erodes, not through force, through interruption. And this is where the placement of the star becomes uncomfortable because it sits right before Taurus, right before embodiment, right before something becomes real, material, lived, which means this is the threshold where a decision is made. Do I carry the spark into form? Or do I bind it before it even gets there? Maybe the symbolism has been misread. Maybe Al-Risha is not here to bind things together. Maybe it reveals what has already been prematurely bound. The agreements you didn't consciously make, the conditions you inherited, the structures that were placed on your movement before you even recognize it as yours. And then the question changes. Not what am I committed to, which is what people say when we talk about Taurus, but what was I conditioned to hold before I even chose? Because there is a difference between a living bound and a maintained one. A living bound adapts, moves, responds. A maintained bound requires effort without feedback. One creates coherence, the other drains it. So, here, at the end of Aries, the invitation is not to hold, it's to notice. Where has your movement been bound before it could become real? In your work, in your money, in your voice, in your relationships. Where did the system step in and say, not like that? And what would happen if, just for a moment, you didn't negotiate with that? Not recklessly, not performatively, but just honestly. A small, unbound movement. Because here's what I'm starting to see. The transition into Taurus is not just about building, it's about what is allowed to reach the ground. And if the impulse is bound too early, nothing true ever lands. So, so maybe this crossing isn't about unity at all. Maybe it's about interruption and the quiet, radical act of refusing it. Because the moment you allow something to move from impulse into form without pre-binding it into survival, approval, or structure, you restore the most important loop there is. Action, response, recognition, trust. That's coherence. That's agency. And that's something no system can simulate, only suppress, until you stop asking for permission to move.